Okay, welcome back. I think you can see my window now. So from the first part, what we have seen that this were itself giving some phase delay and attenuation at gigahertz frequencies. So we can't use them directly. Then what type of guiding structures we use? Here are the examples. One of them is coaxial cable. If you look carefully, coaxial cable, it has one inner conductor, one outer conductor, and in between we have a dielectric material. So electromagnetic wave, it propagates through this dielectric material. Then why we are using metal? Just to bound the electromagnetic wave. Otherwise, it will spread in space. So to confine it inside the cable, we are using the outer metal. Now, what is the purpose of inner metal? That we will discuss later. This is to have some particular mode distribution inside the structure, a specific relationship between electric field, magnetic field, and also the propagation direction. So it can, we popularly call it TEM wave, transverse electromagnetic wave, or TEM wave. So to obtain that, we also need a second conductor. So that's why we are using the inner conductor. This is the first example. In most of the measurement instruments, you will find that a coaxial cable is being used. So coaxial cable, compared to the other guiding structures I'm showing here, it is lossy, but it has a property that it is flexible. You can twist it, you can turn it. So because of this reason, we always use coaxial cables with the measurement instruments. The second example is waveguide. Waveguide, it looks like a hollow pipe. The shape, if you look at the shape, it can be rectangular or circular. There are some other geometries, but not very popular. Mostly we use rectangular or circular. Now, it is an all metal structure. Then I said that we can't use metal. Actually, electromagnetic wave here, it is being propagated through the hollow space inside the pipe. So most of the energy lies in air inside the pipe-like structure. Metal, we are just using to confine it so that it can spread in space. Of course, because of the introduction of metal, we have a finite loss, but that is small since most of the energy it is inside air. We can also use it in free space. In fact, for all high power devices, we use waveguide only. For radar transmitters, satellite, even for high power base stations, we always use rectangular waveguide. So compared to all other structures, rectangular waveguide or circular waveguide, it provides least loss and can handle highest power among all the different options I am showing here. Even we can transmit a few kilowatts to megawatt of power through rectangular or circular waveguide. The next example, these three examples actually falls under the category of PCB technology, printed circuit board technology. But our PCB, high frequency PCB, is different than that being used at low frequency. In what sense it is different? Because First of all, we are using the dielectric material for electromagnetic wave propagation. If you look at the very first structure, we call it microstrip line. We have metal on top as well as below the dielectric. So bottom side we usually call the ground plane, but this ground concept is different than what you learn in basic electronics or circuit theory. We learn, and on top of it you can see that there is one more metallic strip. So where the electromagnetic wave stays, it is just below the top metal strip. I will show you some picture of field distribution later. We call it microstrip line. So for now, then these two metals on top a narrow strip and bottom throughout a metal ground plane, and in between we have the dielectric layer, and the dielectric region which is just below the top strip we are using for electromagnetic wave propagation. In PCB technology, there are some other forms of guiding structure. In general, all of them we call guiding structure. Here, coplanar waveguide. For the coplanar waveguide, again, it is a two-layer metal. Bottom plane you can't see, it is a all metal structure without any slot or anything else. The top view I am showing here, those dots are actually metal vias. They are connected from top to bottom, and if you look carefully, you can see two parallel slots. So most of the electromagnetic wave, it travels through these slots. We call it coplanar waveguide. So again, you see, most of the electromagnetic wave energy, it lies inside dielectric material. Air is also a dielectric. Well, last we discussed that a wire, it will give you some attenuation and also some phase delay. Then what about these structures? The phase delay concept is also true for all these guiding structures. We have to take the phase into consideration. So how we will be writing it, we'll see, we'll show it later. Now, what about the attenuation? This attenuation actually greatly reduced than a single wire transmission, how we did for 50 Hertz signal. Because metal loss could be avoided greatly. There are other sources of loss like dielectric loss. There can be also radiation from the structure. But dielectric loss, you learned actually one term, loss tangent. It is determined by loss tangent value, and this dielectric loss is much less compared to metal loss. So that's why we use dielectric for microwave signal propagation. Well, so different guiding structures, they have their own advantages and disadvantages. So when we'll go through the guiding structure chapter, we'll discuss in detail how the electric and magnetic field, it travels through a guiding structure, what are the modes being supported by a guiding structure, how we model attenuation or phase delay for a guiding structure. So all these points we learn when we'll go through this chapter. Well, we can also use the properties of transmission line or the properties of guiding structure to obtain different characteristics. What type of characteristics? Like filtering. So in circuit lab, in network lab, you designed filter. If you recall, you used inductor, capacitor, resistor. this type of discrete components to design a filter: band pass filter, band stop filter, low pass filter. But here we can utilize the properties of transmission line to design filter, and usually we prefer that. Why? Because if I introduce discrete components, I discussed about their problems. So we try to avoid all those lumped components at gigahertz frequencies. If it can be achieved by the properties of guiding structure itself, then it is better to use that, because that will give you much lower loss compared to all those lumped components. Here is one example. In PCB technology, this is a band pass filter. We use the concept of resonator, half wavelength resonator we'll be learning. And if you look carefully, left hand side, it starts with a microstrip line. We feed at the left hand point, and rightmost, this is the output port, another microstrip line, and in between we have 1, 2, 3 metal strips. They work like half wavelength resonators, and their spacing, their dimensions, these are very important parameters. They determine the properties of the bandpass filter. So this example is for is at millimeter wave, and the outside metal with many dots. These dots actually these are metallic vias or metal pins which connect top layer to bottom layer. So this is a protecting layer so that there is no interference from other circuit components placed nearby with the filter. So then we can use the properties of transmission line or guiding structures to design passive components. This is the filter example. We can also design power divider, coupler, phase shifter, time delay network, attenuator, and so on, all using passive components. In general, we call them passive components when we are utilizing the properties of transmission line or the properties of guiding structure to design these components. So when we go for designing these components, so some of the terms which becomes very important, which are attenuation. Here attenuation is less, but it is not negligible. Then what is the power handling capability and monomode bandwidth? Well, monomode bandwidth, now it would be difficult to explain. So one given structure, it can support different types of modes, and always we prefer that the structure should support only one of them. So the frequency range over which the structure itself supports only one mode, we call it monomode bandwidth. Well, then what type of guiding structure you should choose, it depends on what type of applications you are targeting. If it's a radar transmitter, you have to deal with a power level, let's say in the range of kilowatt. Only option is waveguide. Even though it is bulky, it looks like a pipe, I said. So it is bulky, heavy, expensive, but
Sir, you're muted again.
okay. So other than these parameters, size and cost. So monomode bandwidth, could you hear, or just one of you please switch on your microphone and tell me when I was explaining monomode bandwidth, could you hear it or not? Monomode bandwidth. Well, could you hear me that time? Okay, I'm going through it. Okay, I'm explaining it once more. What is monomode bandwidth? So we'll see later that this guiding structure, it can support different types of modes, and different mode has different characteristics. When we design any circuit, it is preferable that the structure itself should support only one of the modes. Then the range of frequency over which a guiding structure supports a single mode, we call it monomode bandwidth. Next important thing is power handling capability. What type of guiding structure you will be choosing, it depends on application. For example, if I design a radar transmitter and you are asked to handle a few kilowatt of power, then only option is the waveguide, even though it is bulky compared to others. Now, for a few milliwatt to a few tens of watt or lower power, typically we use PCB technology. So, other than this, size and cost, these are two important parameters, particularly for consumer market, it should be cheap. So if you design a very good smartphone with very good connectivity and GBPS data rate, but if you charge it 1 lakh rupees or 5 lakh rupees, nobody is going to buy it. Well, then don't we use any sort of discrete components? We do, but it looks different. So if you look at the picture here, top left, these are the components you use in basic electronics lab and analog circuit lab. You can identify from left side, it is diode, then a BJT, then ICs. Now you compare the right hand side components. So what should be the difference from the points we discussed till now? First thing is its size. Compared to operating wavelength, the size should be much smaller. So you can see, we call it surface mountable device or SMD components, and typically we use them in PCB technology. And look at their sizes. I gave you a size chart. So when you are buying actually any component, they will mention the package size like 0201, 0402, 0603, and so on. So what it means, 02 is 0.02 inch and 01 corresponds to 0.01 inch. So this is the size of 0201 series. Well, if I decrease the size, one drawback is that power dissipation is directly related to its size. So the power dissipation value will decrease. One resistor shown here, which you used with the breadboard, typically it can have a power dissipation factor half watt or 250 milliwatt, but for most of the SMD components, it is 125 milliwatt or less than that. Then what about the ICs? Look at their leg. I said that if I use a wire has some self-inductance. How I can decrease it? It depends on diameter also. But if I decrease the length of the wire a straightforward way, inductance will decrease. And you look at the right side ICs, we call it QFN packaging. So it looks completely different. We have to solder it below the IC. So I am showing here two different views. So bottom side, the large gray part, it represents the ground plane of the IC. And now you can see the legs. These are much smaller compared to the low frequency ICs. Even after that, we have to model properly what are the parasitic inductance or capacitance values. For example, I am showing a resistor equivalent circuit. So it is not a perfect resistor anymore. So by decreasing its size or by changing the configuration of the leads, we could decrease the parasitic effect, but it is still there. So typically the SMD components we use in our lab, we have the facilities actually, and we are designing this type of circuits. I will show you some pictures. So it is 1 nanohenry or less. Capacitor of the order of 1 picofarad, but that is also not a small value when I am going to X band. You recall X band frequency, it is 8 to 12 gigahertz. So even 1 nanohenry, it is also a high value for us. So a resistor, then we can't simply use as a resistor. In the simplest form, simplified form, I'm showing it on top. We use one inductor which represents the inductance of the lead, and a parasitic capacitor CP which is due to the packaging. If you want to go for much accurate modeling, there are different models available here. I'm just showing one of them. It becomes much more complicated. Anyway, so till now what we learned for the SMT components, that their size should be different, the packaging technique should be different, and that's why actually it becomes expensive compared to the low frequency options, and their equivalent circuit also it becomes different, because LSCP, not that it is not there for low frequency components, but they are so small compared to other values at kilohertz or megahertz, you neglected it, but we can't. Well, then in circuit form, how they looks, what are the technologies we are using in radar circuit or inside our mobile phone or in satellite. So it looks, we have three parallel things. I will be showing one of them one by one. Sorry, three of them one by one. So this is the first example is printed circuit board technology. Some of the circuits developed by our MTech and PhD students I am showing here. So all these circuits are designed by them and fabricated here only. We have the fabrication facility. We have a PCB lab. We also have the measurement facilities. And all the microwave part, it is very expensive. How expensive? Let me give you one example. In analog circuit or basic lab, we have used oscilloscope, if you remember. So a digital oscilloscope, it can be 30,000 to 50,000 DSO, not more than that. And what is the highest frequency of operation? Typically 10 megahertz or 30 megahertz. Above that, you can't see it in real time. Now, if I buy an oscilloscope which will operate till, let's say, 12 gigahertz, how much it can cost? Do you have any idea? 30,000 rupees I said for the 30 megahertz, and for 12 gigahertz it costs more than 30 lakhs. So you can then imagine, because of all these complicated problems, some of them you will be learning. Well, the first example here, it is a detector circuit. So if any RF power falls on the circuit, actually we have a RF input port here. We are using a connector where you can connect a coaxial cable, and then at the output side it will give you some DC voltage. If the input incoming RF has some modulation, then amplitude modulation, then the output DC voltage will vary according to the amplitude modulation. So basic detector circuit you will be learning in your communication class, analog communication. Mixer we use for frequency translation. When I'm speaking, maximum frequency it can go up to 20 kilohertz audio signal. If I directly transform to electrical signal, again highest component is 20 kilohertz. Now we can't directly transmit a low frequency signal like kilohertz signal, so we have to use some sort of modulation. Different modulation schemes you will be learning in your communication class. Analog modulation, we also have digital modulations. We'll discuss if time permits. So for that we need a frequency translation 20 kilohertz to 900 megahertz. Similarly, at the receiving side, incoming signal 900 megahertz, you have to down convert it to kilohertz. That is done by a mixer using the nonlinearity properties of any active device. If you look at the circuit carefully, these are actually microstrip line. Why different shapes? Again, we are using the properties of transmission line to design the passive part, even the matching network. Matching network at low frequency we used RCL, but here we just use the properties of transmission line, their width, their length, and their shape. And actual active components, if you look for the single balance mixer, two black dots near IF side, these are two diodes, Schottky diodes. So this is the only active components used in the circuit, and we are using the nonlinearities of these active circuits to translate the frequency. Here is the example of antennas. You see, always we are using some sort of dielectric material. For left side, dielectric material looks white, right side it looks black color. So dielectric constant is different. Bottom, here it is a Doppler radar designed here, fabricated also, and we are using a single IC in the middle and some SMD components if you look carefully. Right side, all passive design, some different filters and couplers. Well, this is in general PCB technology. So these are all circuit components, and only one RF complete system I have shown as a Doppler radar here, which consists of many circuit components. Well, now how we design IC at microwave frequencies. So we have some parallel technologies. In one technology, we use group 3, group 5 semiconductor material. Some examples are gallium arsenide, gallium nitride, indium phosphide, aluminum, gallium nitride, aluminum, gallium arsenide, and so on. Silicon no, sorry, that is different. So these different technologies, they have different advantages and disadvantages. In your device class, you will learn about mobility, transit time, and how they affect FT or unity gain frequency of any given device. So the low frequency active device like BJT or MOSFET you used in your lab till now, we can't directly use them. For us, FT or unity gain frequency should be very high. A thumb rule is that if I want to design an amplifier at 10 gigahertz, then the FT of given transistor should be at least 100 gigahertz. And sometimes it is difficult to obtain that in silicon germanium technology. So gallium arsenide gives higher mobility. Similarly, gallium nitride, it has another advantage. We can design high power circuit at gigahertz frequencies. So for high power circuit, we use gallium nitride. Indium phosphide, it will give you both high power, high mobility. Then the second one is silicon germanium technology. It is not the CMOS, even though CMOS is designed in silicon. So here we call it high resistivity silicon. Maybe after 1 month or 2 months, when we learn some of the basic concept of microwave engineering, then we can discuss about these technologies. What is the difference between CMOS and silicon germanium? Well, next is CMOS, complementary MOSFET. Already you have used it, and CMOS originally it came for digital market, digital circuits. These are optimized for that purpose. So basically they works as a switch on and off, and main target for CMOS optimization, that device area is small so that you can go for very high integration, and device power consumption is very low. 90% of the chips available in market, I'm considering all the frequency range starting from a few hertz to gigahertz. 90% of the chips are based in CMOS technology, and they are digital chips. So now all we are going digital. So can we use CMOS for microwave circuit? Yes, you can, under some limitation, but at lower frequencies. So since CMOS is an optimized process, and there are some CMOS foundries actually in world, but they optimized it for what? For digital circuit. Now for RF circuit, our requirement is different. So already they spend billions of dollars for optimization for this digital process. Now they won't be changing it for your RF circuit. So whatever available, you have to utilize that. And if you follow this, we can design till a few gigahertz. So if you ask me to give a numerical value, typically below 6 gigahertz. If you go above, it creates a problem. But CMOS is interesting because since it is optimized, it is the cheapest solution. I'm giving you the example of smartphone. Smartphone now available even for 5,000 rupees. It is possible because of utilization of CMOS technology only. So if you open your smartphone, there will be 1 or 2 chips that will deal with the RF part, and once it is down converted to megahertz, then everything go to CMOS chips. So most of the chips then here inside your smartphone, it is based in CMOS technology. But why we can't use in gigahertz frequency range? Two reasons. One, because of the properties of MOSFET itself. For MOSFET, gate capacitance is very high. You are using a capacitor at the gate terminal, if you recall the device. And I said 1 picofarad is a very high value for us. So that creates a problem. And the second problem comes from the dielectric loss. We'll discuss later. So we can't use metal, as I said. So dielectric is the option, but the silicon they use, it is lightly doped already. So we can't use it as a substrate and loss becomes very high. So this is a challenge for the RF engineer. BiCMOS, it is basically a mixture of BJT and CMOS concept. Well, this is just for your information. So compared to FET, BJT, they works much better at higher frequencies. We call them, we have another version of BJT, we call them heterojunction bipolar transistor, HBT, and even they can operate at terahertz frequencies. No FET can at terahertz. So BJT or its version HBT has this property. So that's why BiCMOS is becoming popular, which is basically a combination of this BJT technology and CMOS technology at millimeter wave frequency and beyond. So if you ask me what is the future in general of semiconductor industry for millimeter wave or higher frequency, it is BiCMOS. Well, now let us consider about the silicon germanium chip fabrication. Typically, it comes under the term RFIC, RF integrated circuit. How it is fabricated and how it looks inside. Process in brief. If you look at the structure, this is from Fujitsu, Japan, 120 nanometer CMOS technology. All the devices or most transistor, it sits in the bottommost layer. Well, below this bottom, we have a bulk P-type or N-type material, which actually I am not showing. So the technology, the process, fabrication process, it starts with a lightly doped P-type material or lightly doped N-type material, bulk P-type or N-type material. Then the first layer is fabricated is all the devices. Then after devices, you can see so many layers, dark, light, and so on. So all this dark part basically silicon oxide, and the shaded part, these are the metal layers. Now here, how many metal layers we have? 1, 2, 3, 4 to 7. For some of the digital circuit, it can go up to 40 layers. Can you imagine 40 layers? Now the question comes, why do we need so many metal layers? If you look at the device size carefully, here I'm showing in the picture, device size is very small. Your 120 nanometer technology, so gate length, it can be as small as 120 nanometer. It's quite small compared to the connecting wires. So what is the typical diameter of the wire? It is of the order of 1 micrometer. So compared to your wire diameter, device size is small. Now let's say you are going to integrate millions of devices, and now you need interconnections. How will be doing interconnections? So basically in breadboard you use just a few devices, and how many wires you use? You think about that. Now here you are using millions of transistors and going to integrate them. So how many wiring connections will be needed? So that is not possible just by using 1 or 2 layers. So that's why there are so many connecting layers. Well, now this is the technology available for the digital circuits. Now, how we can utilize this for our microwave circuit purpose? Well, look at their dimension. Typical diameter, I said, of the order of 1 micrometer, 1.2 micrometer, and so. Bottommost layer to topmost metal layer, it is approximately 30 micrometer. Now, what is the wavelength we calculated at 1 gigahertz? 1 gigahertz, 10 to the power 9. So 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter by 10 to the power 9, it becomes 30 centimeter in free space. In silicon, it will be less. So let us take free space example, 30 centimeter. So if I use wire in the breadboard of length a few centimeter, it is giving me phase delay problem. But if I use a few micrometer of length, I can simply avoid that phase delay problem. It is like you are doing breadboard circuit at 1 megahertz, right? A few centimeter of length, you are doing 1 megahertz. It is similar to you are using a few micrometer of length at 1 gigahertz. So it should not create that much of problem. Now, what about the single wire transmission? Again, the same thing. We are not sending the signal over 5 centimeter or 10 centimeter. It is just 10 micrometer, 20, 30 micrometer. Of course, there will be attenuation, but for this small range attenuation, we can neglect it. So this is the basic logic of RFIC, but still there is some problem coupling between two interconnects, crosstalk, and so on. So if you can take care of that, you can still use that low frequency concept to design RFIC. And that's how people doing it actually. So most of the RFIC engineers, they don't have actually microwave engineering background. And this is creating another problem that you can't go beyond 2.4 even gigahertz. Then all these problems start coming. And initially, I said that for 5G, people thought they will be using 60 gigahertz band. So we can go for 10 Gbps data rate and so on, so on. So, but the problem mostly they faced because of this design problem, design challenge, and they could not. And finally, now they are planning to use below 6 gigahertz. They call it sub 6 gigahertz band. Okay, so then the conclusion is that if you want to design circuit at higher frequencies, only option is that you have to go from microwave viewpoint. You have to learn Maxwell's equations, its utilization, how we do calculations based on electric field and magnetic field, and then only you can design the circuits. So we, instead of RFIC, we use a different term. We call it microwave integrated circuit or millimeter wave integrated circuit. In general, we call MMIC. So MMIC, here we always use the concept of Maxwell's equations, not the low frequency concept. So that's why we don't face this type of problem. We consider all of this thing, and then this crosstalk and other things, everything is taken care. Well, since it is one of the most popular things, so that's why I described a little on it. Now, how it looks in PCB form. You see bottom right picture. This is the PCB of a smartphone. You can see there are so many chips and so many assembly components, discrete components. So some of the chips, most of the chips actually are digital chips. So they deal with signal processing. Now the RF part, only one or two chips, and rest they are being used by RFIC engineer or VLSI engineers for signal processing mostly. So RF block is a small block here. So as RF engineer, our job starts from antenna. Then we have usually low noise amplifier for the receiver circuit, power amplifier for the transmitter circuit. We use sometimes a switch, SPDT, to switch between the transmitter and receiver circuit. Then a series of amplifier, filter, and then the mixer. So once it is down converted, our job is done. So we call it front end of the circuit, front end. So one RF engineer is expected to design the front end part of any application. Well, now at the end, all of these components, they are sitting on a single PCB board. So let me compare with our circuit here. So it is not, of course, this space is not optimized like a smartphone. So this is a student design by one MS student, actually master degree student. But anyway, this chip, it is a 2.4 gigahertz communication chip. So we converted it to radar circuit, and these discrete components mostly we are using for biasing. Well, here also the discrete components, you can see some of the small components, most of them capacitors and inductors and resistors. So these are mostly for biasing. Okay, here is one interesting point. Have you ever seen computer motherboard? We are, you see, spending so much of time and energy for miniaturization, but in the computer board, who takes most of the area? Do you have any idea? It is by the electrical engineer. So most of the area is occupied by them. We just take a small part. So same problem we face here also. You are just applying DC biasing. Now you see, you have to isolate DC from your RF source. We can't allow RF leakage to DC, right? So we need to do something. Also, we need to stabilize the DC. Otherwise, your Q point will change and everything will change, the RF performance. So that part, it consumes a huge area here, and most of the discrete components in SMT form RLC are being used for that purpose only. Well, now inside the chip, how it looks, I'm going back. So this is the CMOS process I described, but once this fabrication is done, we can't use a bare chip on the PCB board. We need packaging. Weather protection, for weather protection. So now if you look here, bottom left, middle part, it is the silicon chip. So all the dark pattern you can see here, these are the top layer metal. So it is a bare chip. Now we take out connection to output side, and then we'll pour some plastic material. First layer is silicon nitride, then plastic material, so that from outside it will look like this. Top right chip. So from outside it looks like this. Black color usually plastic material, and those are the gray color, those are the leads. So then if I go back to this circuit, you see how the leads are connected internally. So this chip itself, it is very small. Then by using some adhesive glue, we first glue it to a small PCB part, usually a ceramic component. So in fact, in top right figure, I explained it for SMT components. So we use the same concept here. So it is glued on a ceramic plate. It looks like a white color here. Now we have to take out the connection from chips. In chips, the separation, it is in micrometer, and output side it looks like a micro strip line now. Now, if you look carefully, there are some gold wire. We call it wire bonding. Typical length just a few hundred micrometer. So these outside leads, they are connected to silicon chip soldered directly. Well, in SMD form, left side, even though in the figure I am showing it diode, but actually inside I am showing here a resistor. So you know the low frequency part, I am discussing the high frequency part. So for the resistor, we don't need this silicon. We use a thin film, usually made of nickel chromium. Now the resistance, it depends on area. Thickness is defined by industry. So you have control over area. So how much resistance you need, accordingly you change the area. Then it is pasted on a ceramic tiles, you can see here. And then on top, we use some insulation layer for weather protection, and the left and right side, these are the metal contacts, so that finally it looks something like this. You can see the finger. Here we have different sizes of these SMD registers. So if I change the size, if I go to smaller size, then you can go up in frequency scale, but at the cost of power dissipation. Well, now this is the last slide for today. Now, what we do for high power devices when we deal with kilowatt, high power as well as very low power. Two examples. We use waveguide based structure. So I'm showing here a waveguide filter. These are actually cavities inside a metal block. Now the top plane is removed. So once the top metal plate is screwed with this, so it looks like embedded cavities of different dimensions, different shapes. How to obtain this dimension and shape, some of them we'll learn. And we can use this filter even at kilowatt frequencies. So the antennas, it looks completely different. Here is a waveguide circuit, bottom left I'm showing for kilowatt applications. Now I put a comment there that we use for very high power as well as for very low power. How low? Sometimes in some applications, power can be as low as picowatt, almost like noise level, or even sometimes signal can be buried under noise level. Let me give you one example, radio astronomy. So when you are looking at the stars, the signals are so faint that you need a very big antenna to collect sufficient signal. So once you collect it, it has to travel to receiver. You need a guiding structure for that. Now, what is the problem? If I use PCB technology or coaxial cable, the problem is it's lossy. Its loss is higher compared to waveguide. I said that waveguide provides least loss. So that's why again, for this very low loss structure, waveguide is used because of its very lower loss. Well, so till this point, we discussed actually some of the technologies and their applications which we use for day-to-day applications as well as in defense and space. Well, one interesting point, can't we do some of them by using infrared or visible wavelength? Why always microwave? So why it is always microwave? There is a reason, particularly for defense and space. Because for microwave, it is we call it all-weather system. If we have heavy rain, sandstorm, snowfall, so when it is under heavy rain, if you look, let's say 100 meters away, you can't see anything. So visible wavelength is so much attenuated. If it is foggy, then also it is true for visible wavelength as well as it is true for infrared. For microwave, the attenuation is much less compared to visible wavelength or infrared. So that's why we call it all-weather system. Now you consider your mobile phone. When you are speaking to your friend, if it rains outside or if there is a snowstorm or sandstorm, you don't have any problem. You can continue speaking. This is possible because microwave has almost no attenuation compared to them. So this is called a all-weather system. That's why in defense and space, always it is microwave. Well, so let me stop here. For now, if you have any questions, so you can type. Otherwise, I can take it later also. Yeah, Shayantan. Yes, Shayantan. So you raised your hand. If you have any question, you can ask. For bonding, it is wire. Microstrip is different, right? It is a metal strip which sits on some dielectric layer we call substrate. That is microstrip. For bonding, it is a wire, but wire length is small in micrometer. Of course, it will give you inductance. So modeling of wire bond, it is an issue at high frequency. Any other queries? Mode that we have to learn. It is almost similar to modes related to your string or a hollow pipe. You learned about Helmholtz resonator, or in your higher secondary most probably one pipe, hollow pipe, one end open, one end closed. It can support different audio signal. So mode concept is similar. We'll discuss. So this was just an introduction. X-ray, UV ray, why we can't use for communication? Yes, we can for line of sight communication, but you see, attenuation due to fog, rain, then snowstorm, sandstorm. I said it is high for infrared visible wavelength. If you go higher frequency, it is much more. Then for ground wave propagation, you also have to consider attenuation due to foliage, reflection from building, and so many things. So we'll discuss about propagation. So that's why we can't use X-ray or ultraviolet ray. More energy, you see, this is a vague question. So energy, if you ask me energy for a photon, then it depends on frequency, h nu, right? Or h into frequency. H is the Planck's constant. And for electromagnetic wave, we don't use particle concept. We consider wave concept. So we consider transmitted signal, received signal, and we calculate the power. Just how you did for low frequency, but here it is in a different way. We learn how to do that. So for any communication channel, SNR, signal to noise ratio, is very important. If you want to maintain certain bit error rate, we'll discuss this, we'll learn. Anything else? Okay, thank you all. So I'm stopping recording, and you check this is available even when I'm offline or not. So MS Team is also new for us, so it might take 1 week or so to learn it properly.